Okay, so maybe one question is maybe for all of you, what is the most serious chain reaction problem you have encountered in your project administration, contract administration experience so far? Of course, not revealing too much that it becomes a problem.
Okay, I'll quickly start off.
Okay, I can see you're excited to do that. Okay.
No, I want to get it over with.
Okay.
No, one of the projects I'm most well known for is running on the RADARS form, and if those of you who have run RADARS before, you realize that within the contract provisions, right, there's no delay cert, you know. So there's no delay cert down there. Then what happens is that, unlike SIA, they hit the date, delay cert, then you have termination, then have that restart of the delay cert again. So very clearly, but the RADARS does not have that provision. So what happens when the project actually hit the original contract completion date, which was still far from completion, I had no instruments to issue out, to warn the contractor. So what I did was I did a letter out to warn him that he had already crossed that particular date. The irony of the whole thing was that the client then sent me a nasty letter saying that you have no right to do so because the contract gave you no such powers. Because the contract is silent about it. You have no powers as an ER to issue such a letter, because there's no delay. But subsequently what happened was that because of my letter, they were able to later on during the final account assess where was the line in the sand. So in a certain sense, but the exoneration came years later. But in the meantime I had to live under the umbrella of being somebody who didn't administer the contract to the letter of the law.
How about yourself?
I think in most cases it boils down to dollars and cents. Okay, any project is about time and cost. And often these things, when it gets into this, it's an issue of contractors complaining I'm not getting paid by the client, and therefore an issue, or the other way is client will come back and say, hey, project's been delayed, I can't move into my premises and there's this delay, and it's usually those situations, and I think as contract administrator you have to really go by the letter. So in effect, that will not only protect your own interests as a contract administrator and an architect, as I mentioned, it also helps to educate the client to say that, look, if you administer it in a proper manner, the less likelihood of the client getting a situation where they are at the losing end of a dispute.
How about?
I think for myself, it's when I run projects, I often wear the architect's hat more often than the contract administrator's hat. So as you run projects, doing coordination works, you start giving instructions, you start making changes because of site coordination. And often or not, all these costs will start to pile up. But the contractor will not highlight to you. They will park it all towards the end, towards the final account, then throw you one lump sum of cost. Say, Mr. Architect, you have changed this, you have made these changes, and I'm going to charge you this. Which in the first place, we are not fully aware of that implication of the cost, because that has not been highlighted to us. Then when you put up this cost, client will start to look at consultants. Why do you make these changes? Why was this not highlighted? So that becomes a negotiation effort between QS, architects, and the client. So that is usually a long drawn affair after the contract is completed to close the final account.
Also, to chip in here, I think at least in my experience, right, you need to be able to discern between an opinion and an instruction.
Yes.
Because project managers can tell you whatever they want to tell you, and to your point, the cost is not known to them. So later on they'll say, why did you do this, and you said, well, you said it and it's minuted, and they'll turn around and say, that was just an opinion.
So I think interestingly, because also quite recently I told my team members to make sure that even though we communicate through WhatsApp, it's important to send, whether it's a document or anything for confirmation, through email again.
Yes.
Because like what you say in the group chat, not just people added later. Nowadays, we can connect our WhatsApp to the computer. You can sign in to the computer. One thing I realized is that I can open the file at the computer, and a month later, I open the chat in my chat trying to look for that document. I cannot load it anymore.
Correct.
And on top of that, also to viewers at home, nowadays, WhatsApp, you can have disappearing messages.
Yes.
Yep.
I was trying to trace back to one of the chats with the clients also because he confirmed on something. I was trying to look for it. And I say, hey, this fella changed to disappearing messages. I didn't even know, you know. So this becomes a problem. I know back then I've also consulted lawyers before where they say, WhatsApp is still, it can be considered you know, as a confirmation. But with all these disappearing messages and things like that, it's
too messy.
Yeah, still email is still the best thing to fall back on.
In fact, in administrating the SIA conditional contract, something I learned in one of the firms I work with, where I had a kind of a contract manager who was kind of mentoring us, and he made it a very good point. He said, I mean, at the time there wasn't WhatsApp, and even emails was quite new then. I'm not sure how old we are. So we say all documentation, all correspondence as far as contract is concerned, it's either AD or AI. Okay, don't issue a letter that doesn't state anything. So that kind of keep the contract administration documentation very clear. But now with emails, with WhatsApp, it becomes challenging and how to kind of put everything together such that you have a good log of what has transpired, you know, throughout the whole process.
Okay, so I guess, you know, that's more on the contracts and the communication, but what happens when you meet a rebellious contractor that doesn't listen to your instruction or direction? What do you do? I think this, depending on what form of contract also, right?
Depending which
boils down to
measure.
two things: cost or time. So if they don't listen to you, it's either a cost implication or a time implication. So you just have to get this clarified. Why do they not want to listen to your instruction? It's usually these two things lah.
And it usually happen because the contractors is appointed by the client directly. Some friend's friend. Right? They only listen to a client and they'll bypass it.
To kind of like give a little bit more depth to your question, right? I would want to say that if they don't want to listen, right, you know, as an administrator, I think it will be useful to try and find out what triggered it first. Now, for example, we all know exam question, you know, if the contractor is already in delay and you issue him a fresh instruction, right, you're essentially riding on his delay to get more things done, you know, and he'll potentially get into further delay. So of course, you know, a smart contractor says, I'm already in delay, I'm not going to fall into your trap and, you know, end up in further delay, and that's why he needs to do that. So if we can understand that, right, then we know the objective basis why he has declined to carry out instruction. Or perhaps maybe his payment has been held back for so long, right, that he cannot continue to bankroll it, you know, because I think a lot of us don't quite realize the poor contractors actually put out a lot of money up front. You know, actually architects too, we are subsidizing our client. But, you know, it's about, you know, no oil left to oil the gears.
So usually at the end of the project.
Actually, not really. You know, I've actually encountered exactly that one down there, but simply because the contractor actually, on one hand, he wasn't very, he wasn't very hardworking in that sense, but at the same time, he had a very good programmer who actually basically told him his critical path and all this kind of thing already. So he knew upfront why he shouldn't take on the extra instruction, you know. Yeah, and then, you know, when we point out to him that, hey, the contract requires you to accept it, and this kind of thing, right, you know, he tried to contest it in that particular sense. Yeah. So understanding before we become judgmental, right? I think it's back to the temperament part.